As a quick show of hands, how many people use Drupal Commerce right now? All right, there's a few. How many people have evaluated it but then went to a different platform? Or how many evaluated it and just didn't end up getting that project? Okay, a few. So real quick, my name is Matt Glaman. I am product lead at Centauro. Centauro is the team that created and leads Drupal Commerce. You may also know us as the company formerly named Commerce Guys. As product lead, I help build some of our internal tooling that I'll discuss a little bit later as well. I'm a Drupal Commerce 2.x co-maintainer. I wrote the Drupal 8 development cookbook, and if you've heard about Drupal check or PHP stand Drupal, all that stuff, that is actually something that I maintain and spun out of some Centauro products that we have built. All right, so we'll get into the session. What is headless commerce? And this is going to be kind of like a rehash of other things you've heard at this conference because the coupled concepts kind of transcend the different strategies or purposes. So headless commerce separates the customer experience layer from the core business application. So your core business application is your transaction server, and the customer experience layer is your product catalog, the add to cart forms, the way that they interact with your products. By going with headless commerce, you're able to support any number of front-end websites or apps from a single backend. Again, that's been the main concept of this whole conference as people talked about decoupled. It also allows you to evolve and scale your platform without impacting other components. So you can build new front ends, you can customize the front end requirements without affecting your back end transaction server, or upgrade your transaction server without taking down your front ends. And here's some quick examples. So typically when you think decoupled, it's like, oh, there's a React front end behind a API backend. So here's a quick demo of a pure React front end interacting with Drupal Commerce over JSON API to provide a catalog, does the add a cart form, and the only time you interact with Drupal is every time that a network request happens. No rendering or any of that stuff. And what about Panoply on Drupal 7? Right? That's a decoupled front end. This was a proof of concept back in January for a client where they have a lot of existing Drupal 7 sites, but they want to add commerce to it. And they're not going to add Drupal 7 Commerce 1 to their Drupal 7 sites. So what if you could create panels panes? That created a decoupled experience. So those are some examples. It doesn't always have to be a JavaScript front end. It could be a legacy existing system that needs to have e-commerce support embedded. Let's go through some of the challenges with delivering headless commerce. There's a structured data model, right? Products have prices. That price consists of an amount and a currency code. It's not just a $ and numbers. You also have adjustments that are for discounts that contain an amount, possibly a percentage if it's taxes. There's different relationship layers. You have an order that has order items that reference the product you bought, that references the attributes of what they purchased. Is it a blue shirt, red shirt, large, medium? And then the current challenge is the data versus presentation layer. As the API First initiative is done, Drupal has a very tight coupling of data and presentation layers. A lot of all of our stuff lives in forms or field formatters and field widgets, but not actually at that raw data layer. We've talked a lot about this at the conference. I'm going to quick go through the available API integration options that are JSON API, GraphQL, and after going to the V4 GraphQL session yesterday, I wanted to note this is, I tested this against V3 and not V4. And of course the good old RESTful Web Services module that's in core. I have a little asterisk because it's the one API integration that doesn't have a response or request schema. So if you're not familiar with JSON API by now, it is a RESTful API specification implemented in Drupal. It supports includes that fetch linked resources, which is nice, so that way you don't have to make a bunch of extra requests to get all the other referenced entities. It allows limiting the fields returned, so you don't just get a big blob, you can actually condense that down. It automatically will expose all entities to the system though, so you need to do some fine tuning to reduce what's exposed. And an important note, it does use entity UUIDs over the integer, like the serial auto incrementing integer IDs. And we have GraphQL, which is a query-like API. It's not a RESTful API. It uses fragments, and I believe I'm using the right term here, to represent sets of fields. So you have the entity type, which is a fragment that has its base fields. Then you have the bundles, which are a fragment of all the available like field config fields on that bundle. You must specify the fields to be returned. You can't just say, give me everything. You have to use an IDE called GraphQL or Insomnia client to be able to parse the schema and generate your queries. It uses the normal identifiers and not UUIDs, which is important to note if you try to use GraphQL and JSON API. You're going to have a conflicting of what IDs you need to use. And to manipulate data, such as create, update, and delete, you have to write mutations because it's not RESTful, so it doesn't use HTTP verbs like post, patch, delete. You have to create mutations. And then the good old RESTful Web Services, the OG REST module that shipped with Drupal 8 that uses plugins to define endpoints. You then configure these plugins through a non-existent UI. And it uses normal identifiers as well. And like I said, it has no opinions on the response or request schema. So it's just Drupal, good old zero, like array, zero, property ID, all that. So let's go into actually turning these integration points into building and delivering a headless e-commerce system. So we'll go over catalogs. This first example is from our demo module with the Belgrade theme. This is good old views plus search API plus facets. Standard, typical Drupal build. You click on facets, it filters through all your different products. And when working with catalogs, you need to be aware of the fact that catalogs are just highly customized queries for products against product types, because you might want to be able to have your books and ebooks within one catalog, or your clothing and books in one catalog as well. These catalogs are powered by search indexes, whether it's like Search API with the database backend, or Solr or Elasticsearch, or whatever have you. That's because we need to utilize facets for fine-tuned browsing. I want to shop by this brand, or by this color, or by this size. You also need to be aware of the pricing. Is this a B2B user? Is this a wholesaler? Is this like a VIP customer that has special access to different pricing through price lists? And then also product availability. We have some clients that have inventory that changes every 15 minutes that we import it. And you need to have that inventory be available on the catalog to be displayed or to prevent adding to cart. First we'll go over with JSON API. Out of the box, you can't use JSON API for catalogs because you cannot query across product bundles, and that's one of our strong data modeling points in Drupal Commerce. Not every product has the same kind of data model. Shirts have sizing and colors. A book has maybe soft and hardcover, but even then you might just make those two different products. However, there is an issue open, and that issue should land support into the JSON API extras module if all goes well. Otherwise, you just create a custom controller, which I will show an example of in just a minute. And what you really need is Search API though. And there is a way to get JSON API to integrate with Search API through a little bit of hacking along the way. Now when it comes to GraphQL, this is when it just works because it supports querying across bundles, like it doesn't care due to all the fragments. And that's kind of that example up there. As you query, you say entities on commerce product. Okay, I got a commerce product schema fragment. Then on the different bundles, and you keep going down. The only problem is that gets huge. Like that full example of that is like a page long, and it looks like Goku doing like a spirit bomb to like blow everything away. However, GraphQL does support reusable queries. There's a tool that lets you export the query through some Node.js tool and then import those and then execute it by a specific ID. So if you're using GraphQL with your catalogs, I would highly recommend that because it also locks down your catalog query and people can't go start experimenting with your product data. And then to go to GraphQL again, it actually does have a Search API integration. But there'd be dragons warning here because it doesn't work as most Drupal users would expect it to work. It's more of a proxy. So it allows you to do full text searching and facet searching, but not like the facets module. It's like actually querying Solr directly. So you get the data that's indexed in Solr, which means you have to refactor your search index and how it normally works. Because typically how Search API works is it queries your index and it gets back a series of entity IDs that it then loads and passes to views. So if you use the GraphQL Search API module, you now have to index more data into your Search index, which if you have variable pricing and inventory becomes kind of difficult. Product display pages. So now we've been from the catalog, now let's go to an actual product page. Standard Drupal site, you got your entity view display, some twig, and field formatters. Woo. When working with a product display page, you have a mix of data. You have product data, that's the price, availability, SKU, what store it belongs to, because you could have like 3 stores on your site and that product's not available in certain stores. And then marketing content. Most product pages are actually marketing content. You have the body text, any images, all those things. In Drupal, that's all stored in one spot and kind of easy to manage. And then when you get decoupled, then you have to figure out how you want to manage and represent that data. You also need to represent the various variations. You have a blue shirt, red shirt. When somebody wants to buy the red shirt, it should show those red images. And then add to cart forms are part of the product display page, but we're going to cover those in their own section because that's its own barrel of fun. So with JSON API, this works great. When I'm doing a product display page, it just works. You reference products by their bundle, then UUID. You're able to include the variations, their attributes, any of the taxonomy terms that it's referenced to. And you get just this nice payload of all the data you need to construct a page. If you want to use image styles, you do need to come up with a strategy for that, such as the consumer image styles module. That way you're not serving the 1000 by 1000 picture on a mobile phone, or to anyone, rather. Here's a quick example. The screen's probably blurry, but when the slides are uploaded, it shows an example of a pared down JSON API query with all the different parameters to say, here's my includes, here's my fields. This, with page cache enabled, took about like 40 milliseconds to render and only 8 kilobytes. And to compare what happens when you don't pass all the fields limitations, it's 38 kilobytes large and about 100 milliseconds to render. So that's one of the beautiful things is you can get the full object, know what fields are available, and then start trimming it down to the things you need to be more performant and scalable. When it comes to GraphQL, it is pretty straightforward as well. You retrieve the product by the ID, again, not by UUID or bundle, you just pass an ID like a normal entity load and PHP code. The one benefit it does have, it does allow fetching image styles by derivatives in the query itself. So in here, we're able to say, at the very bottom it says field images, derivative style, catalog, give me the URL width and height, returns that, and you're able to then pass that into your React component to have the proper size image. Again, it comes with image derivatives out of the box. You don't need to worry about the bundle, but you also get a query that's, again, long and very indented. Maybe this changes with GraphQL v4 when you can define your schema. I don't know. I have not played with that yet, but that is now on my to-do list. So we'll go to the add to cart forms. Add to cart. This is really important because that's when somebody says, I want to buy this. So you need to make sure that it works well and that you are fully supported. One of the things with add to cart forms is how do the attributes look? Is it a select list, radio buttons, or do you want to have fancy formatted attributes like color swatches or color images? You also need to identify the currently selected variation. As I pick options, that's resolving to a certain thing that I pick, and that also helps display those fields on the page. And Drupal supports custom order item fields. If you're picking a t-shirt, what if you want them to allow uploading a photo, transcribe text? That's supported out of the box because of Drupal's field system. How do you represent that in your decoupled application? Is something that you really need to consider because Drupal doesn't expose like the form display schema easily, so it has to be manually added. Here's an example of the good old throbber that shows up when you do a form with Ajax and Drupal. This is the out-of-box way that it happens. PHP code says this is a resolve variation. Form API updates everything. This is the cart flyout module, which uses Drupal settings, _ backbone, and jQuery, the core JavaScript library shipped. So it doesn't fetch any of the product data over the API. It just embeds it into the DOM. So that way it takes, I think it's called like hydrating the data. I don't know the proper term, but it takes the JSON, turns that into a data model, and then is able to work add to cart. And the only network request for product information is during the add to cart. And here's JSON API with React. Same concepts, but I had to build a custom add to cart form for this because I couldn't reuse my jQuery backbone and underscore. And once more, last year I did a Gatsby.js demo where I had to again build a custom add to cart component because that takes the JSON API data, puts it into Gatsby.js's GraphQL server, and it's a different data format that I had to build. Oh, and can't forget pure jQuery and JSON API. Can't leave that one out. Which was in there twice apparently. So that leaves a challenge for us as maintainers. We need to build abstract but purposeful solutions that are reusable for purpose-built end users. Like, right, when you build a JavaScript front end, it has a specific goal. But how do we as maintainers make sure you can easily achieve that? When I built 4 demos, and each time I had to write custom code. I had to write custom code that said, this size and this color does array map reduce filter to find the proper variation that you're purchasing. And forcing all of you to have to come up with that same logic feels like that's a room for mistakes. So if we can find a way to take all the stuff that we have done and make it reusable, that's our current challenge. An example of this in the wild is for Barton's Home, which is a progressively decoupled site that does about 300,000 users per month, and its only caching is dynamic page cache. Thank you, Wayne. Because we can't use the page cache module because they allow you to shop from 120 different stores. And page cache just doesn't work when you have that kind of high cache variation. So they actually sponsored the decoupled add to cart form for Flyout. You see the available pricing, which that doesn't use Ajax, that's actually just using Big Pipe. But if I hit add to cart, that is fully decoupled, and the client launches a modal that then fetches the related products. And this is all client side. None of this is Drupal rendering. As we saw here, there's a check by nearby stores. This loads the client-side modal as well, that pings Search API to get the nearby stores to your location, and then the inventory for all of that. And this is all client-side and API-driven as well. Everything else on the Drupal site is normal Drupal rendering, but this is where progressive decoupling has let us really extend our reach and support a lot of concurrent users. So we've added stuff to the cart. Let's look at shopping cart management, because before, it's all PHP-driven, lives in a session. Carts are owned by anonymous and authenticated users. Out of the box, you may have a site that only allows authenticated purchasers, like Amazon, and a lot of other businesses do that, but most small merchants don't require that because that's a large barrier to entry. Users can modify their carts, but not fully manage them, right? You can add items to your cart, you can add a coupon, you can update an order item, you can remove it from your cart, but you can't say, I'm going to alter the price. So there's a very specific access level that has to be maintained. Also, users shouldn't be able to manipulate another person's cart or check out with it. You know, you don't want somebody to be able to say, haha, this random joker is going to pay $1,000 for their socks. And you need to have constraints on product availability. Client where they have a highly volatile inventory, and you don't want somebody purchasing 100 items that recently sold out 10 minutes ago. So to solve this problem, last year I talked about the road to headless commerce, and now I'm talking about delivering, because we built the cart API module, which was a purpose-built API to interact with the cart system. So that way you didn't need to know all the internals of how you would patch an order item to an order and all this other nonsense there. So it creates get, post, all those fun things. And recently ran into a problem when working on the D7 decoupled experience. Cart tokens. So normally carts are managed via a PHP session. The PHP session has your cart information in it, but cookies don't work across domains. So we added the cart token support. So this way you can pass a cart token as a header or as a query parameter to identify the current user and what carts they own. And this is how we're able to do cross-domain decoupled front ends. Which kudos to Wim for this, because it showed me how to mock a session to bypass page cache using these things. Sorry. With JSON API, it works, but not out of the box, because we need a cross-bundle endpoint. And thanks to Gabe, this is now added to the next version of Cart API. And it's been helpful now that JSON API is in core. It's much more easy to work with and extend if needed. So I said Cart API 2 will use JSON API for its API endpoints. It right now supports a cart collection, adding items to cart. I need to finish the delete and update options. With GraphQL, this is something that did just work out of the box because it supports cross-bundle queries immediately. And since our carts are controlled via entity query access, you don't have to worry about cart data leaking because it performs an entity query. You only get back your carts, just quote unquote works, until you need to manipulate the cart because you need to make mutation. And mutations aren't part of GraphQL modules, but they're part of GraphQL mutations. And then you have to write these custom plugins. So it gave you a collection out of the box, but not all the other goodies. I want to showcase this example that I learned about last year and actually got to meet the developers last year. And I'm not sure if they're here again. For Patrick, I want to say Roger, I'm not sure, which is a chocolate company. And this is actually a headless Angular and Drupal commerce site, but their front end isn't managing the add to cart button. The cart button is actually provided through Snipcart, which is a third-party cart and checkout system. So how they have it going is Drupal Commerce is a product management system. It calculates shipping and taxes, and it's the order management. And every time you add something to the cart in Snipcart, it sends a webhook and updates the order in Drupal Commerce's backend. When you complete your order, it then completes the order in Drupal Commerce, and they can manage it there. So that's how they've delivered headless commerce, is by outsourcing the cart and checkout operations, leaving Drupal Commerce to what it's really good at, the data model and calculating your shipping, taxes, and order management. I wanted to highlight this one too from last year. I released the cart API about a month before Decoupled Days 2018, and somebody had a talk on integrating bots with Drupal Commerce. So you go in, and you can be like, hey, Facebook bot, I want to buy a pizza. Then you can pick your pizza, you can say add to the cart, show your cart, and then say here's my email and complete my order. So that's another example. It doesn't need to just be a React front end, it could be conversational commerce via messaging bots. Go on to coupons. Because coupons and promotions are a hard problem, and it's even harder when now you decouple. So one thing that was created is there is a cart redemption endpoint in the cart API module. So that way you can take a coupon code, post it, and then it will validate if it applies or not. And you can go through. This actually uses a coupon reference constraint. So it's actually a validation constraint put on the entity reference to coupons that whenever the order is validated, it sees if the coupon and promotion still applies. If not, you get a violation back, which means that in a decoupled cart or checkout scenario, you would be able to say, hey, this coupon doesn't apply anymore. If we wanted to implement this in JSON API, it's going to be something custom because you don't want to allow people to query the available coupons for their order. You kind of want to keep that a little bit of a secret. And with JSON API, and in the next slide about GraphQL, you have to always add something via an ID. Or I guess GraphQL would be a mutation, but JSON API, you would have to like post the identifier. So we'll build a custom endpoint with the next cart API version that takes that coupon code to apply it, and we've already built the data layer constraint. So all we have to do is just make sure you can take a coupon code to apply it. So GraphQL, just a pure mutation that will have to be written by us or someone that is using GraphQL for commerce. Talked a bit about checkout, and we'll go all in on it right now. So last year, I wrote a Gatsby.js demo that provided a completely headless checkout using local storage for cart management, and I experimented with a checkout API that let you take an order summary, get back any constraints, and kind of keep building your order based off of it. And then once you knew it was satisfied, you could finalize that order. I don't think it makes for an end implementation, but it definitely exposed a lot of those data and presentation layer couplings that we talked about. Because to place an order, or for an order to be through checkout and completed, all it does is transition an order from a draft to completed or whatever is the next step in its workflow. So how do we find ways to expose that and make that possible for a checkout over the API? And in summary, we're evaluating it, we're figuring it out. With JSON API and GraphQL entity mutations, we need to figure out what to do about entity access because you can't fully manage your cart order. So if your client tries to transition the order from draft to placed, that actually gets an access denied because you don't have access to edit the order. So I think the alternative would be like a JSON RPC endpoint that is more of an action and task. We're going to think about it and see if we can review the different entity access. What if we allow you to edit the state field to transition from draft to something else but not backwards? You need to review all of those kind of implications. But as a way to kind of sidestep that and keep advancing things and to further know more about how to do this stuff, integrate with third-party checkouts. Right now I'm working with PayPal Checkout to be our decoupled checkout demo, where you can go place your order, go through PayPal Checkout, and then once that's done, the webhook will complete the order and your React app will forward you on. Or there's other integrations such as Klarna, which one of our clients uses, and Bolt Checkout. So this whole like outsourcing your checkout, there's lots of products out there that actually make this whole decoupled experience a little bit easier and solves one of those hard problems for you if you wish. I would like to highlight this case study for Concern Worldwide done by System Seed. It is a fully decoupled Drupal commerce site that does not outsource any of those components. Everything is built into it. You go to the donate page, and this is a custom, I believe it's Angular as well. When you click donate, it actually does a request that creates an order for that amount, and then the system redirects you to checkout. And then they've built a custom checkout module or checkout API module that takes all this information and then completes the order and performs the charge. And I believe they're using PayPal Express Checkout in the back end for this as well. So what's on the horizon? Because there's plenty to do here, just like API First Initiative had a lot to do in Drupal core. We want to work on improving the query access and entity access to all these random areas around the carts, around the products, to make sure that things have enough control. The coupon validation constraint lives in Cart API right now, but I want to get that into core commerce. There's an issue for that. I think I just need to go revisit it because Brian had some nits. Computed base field for the order total, because orders have a total price field that is the sum of all the parts. But technically the subtotal is computed, and so are all the adjustments. There's no easy way to fetch that. So in my demo, I've set up a computed base field that gives you the subtotal, the adjustments, and then the final total. And that's going to land in the Cart API, which if you haven't guessed, the Cart API is kind of like our sandbox for all this decoupled stuff before we put it into core commerce. Because once we put it into commerce itself, it's locked down and we can't really break sites that have it running because we can't just jump a major version easily. One of the big blockers that I would love to see land is due to Drupal 8.0, we could not have multi-value fields as base fields. So like variations and order items, because it would break in views. So thanks to views, we have this weird data model problem where fields that are always present and should be a base field had to be made through field config. But we have an issue that a contributor has been pushing forward that will move those back to base fields with an upgrade path. And once that happens, you don't need to care about the product bundle to be able to know what the variations are, which has benefits in your GraphQL query and also JSON API. It makes filtering on those values possible with less adjustments to make a cross-bundle collection work. Work on resolve pricing. I have 2 clients that I've implemented a computed price field for that takes the resolved price. So this is before discounts, or could include discounts. As I had brought up before, price list. Many sites use price lists for different wholesalers, and in a decoupled instance, you don't want the value that's stored in the database. You want that user's actual price that they're going to be paying for. And of course, product availability. I have a patch somewhere that I've been trying to find and work somewhere that adds another reference constraint to the purchase entity field on order items. So whenever an order item is validated, it says, is this product still available? And if that's not available, then you can halt checkout. You can say you need to remove this item. So I'm trying to find it because I know I wrote it, or I dreamt that I wrote it. It'll have to be recreated. And one of the biggest news that's on the horizon, high volume Drupal 7 headless store migrates to Commerce 2X. One of our biggest clients that is a high volume convenience store that has multiple stores, multiple currencies, and shipping integrations. That's a Drupal 7 commerce site for the past 5-6 years with headless React clients in about 6 different markets. Is going to be moving over to Drupal 8. And I've supported this client to do 4,000 concurrent shopping sessions in an hour. Or, yeah, I believe it was hourly for Black Friday, but they are a very high volume customer that will be going to Headless Drupal 8, which is going to be pushing forward a lot more of this roadmap and items and testing out JSON API and maybe GraphQL. And they also integrate with a third-party checkout, which is nice because that helps us avoid that problem and still focus on the main experiences. Okay. So we've talked about all these things. Are you ready to get started? We'll cover some of the available modules. So there's the cart API module. This is what allows you to decouple your cart actions. The JSON API integration is still sandboxed. That's just on my GitHub on a JSON API branch. I need to go formally do a 2.x branch and start posting patches on Drupal.org. The Flyout module is our default implementation to interact with the cart API. Installing this allows you to automatically progressively decouple your Drupal site, which can give you a performance boost. I believe when we first tested this, our demo would take 300 milliseconds to load a product page. When this was added and Drupal didn't need to render a form, it cut down to 100 milliseconds. So by decoupling the add to cart form and the cart block, it cut the time down pretty heavily. So this is a just drop-in replacement that can speed up your site. Of course, JSON API, which is now in core. Woohoo! Congratulations, JSON API team, for achieving that. It also makes our life easier as commerce maintainers because we don't need to tell people, well, you need to use a contrib module for your APIs. It's now something that's in core, which is a much easier sell instead of, well, go fetch a module for that. Then, of course, GraphQL, there's the GraphQL module. And then the Search API integration lives at GraphQL_Search API to allow you to build your headless. And that's about it. Like, there's no other magic there. It's all pretty much exposed for you. There are caveats, so if you find them, I would love to hear issues. Like, just open an issue in the queue or find me in Drupal Slack and say, hey, Matt, I found this interesting problem. If you are getting started and a little weary, I would like to announce Centauro support. So part of the rebrand was we were trying to be more of a product-based company around Drupal commerce. We don't want to be an agency. We want to help you succeed in your builds. So one of those things that you could do is we have professional support, which gets you access to a private Q&A that we maintain and answer questions on. So it's like, oh, hey, Matt, what's the best payment gateway for PCI compliance? You could ask that in Drupal Slack, which we answer those questions and still will, but that disappears in like a day. So this would be a way for you to get a more curated answers and have a knowledge base that doesn't disappear immediately. It also gives you access to our toolbox, which we unveiled at DrupalCon Seattle. As I brought up our quality monitor, which built Drupal Check, is just a static analysis tool to say, hey, we noticed that you did a few things a little funky. You might want to adjust this for performance reasons. Our update assistant and access to partner products, like Avalara is one of our partners, or Tax Automation Cloud, and Human Presence, which is like a replacement for Mollum. I believe there's some kind of deal that we have there. So that's part of our support as we try to sustainably fund Drupal commerce development and help other teams deliver Drupal commerce. If you want a little bit more than that, because you have a very critical project, we do have priority support, and this will give you onboarding, project review, kind of like hand-holding experience. We'll audit your site and also give you private ticket access. So if you have more intimate questions about your project, we can give you like a Zendesk integration as well. And that will help you deliver your headless Drupal commerce sites. I'll just say thank you for coming. I appreciate you coming to the session. And we can open up for some questions if you have it. Here are links to the various demos that are available. Again, I don't expect anybody to write this down. I will post the slides. The JSON API and React one, I converted my GraphQL demo from last year in a week. So it doesn't have like a clean domain. So that first one is pure JSON API and React. The React.demo.centauro.io is GraphQL and React. The Gatsby.js demo obviously Gatsby.js, and then demo.kickstart.com is like our out-of-the-box progressively decoupled example. Thank you for coming.